President Trump is vowing to buy a Tesla after the company's stock plunged.
Tesla shares down more than 5% today, with the stock on pace to notch a seventh straight down week.
At least a dozen Teslas were torched in France in a suspected arson attack. The prosecutor's office said that it is probing Sunday night's attack.
Mexico and Canada didn't just block Tesla, they wiped it off the map. For the first time ever, two close allies of the US blacklisted a major American tech company. No warnings, no negotiations, no drawn-out delays, just a signature, and then total economic decapitation. $146.3 billion in value gone. Starlink contracts canceled, tariffs slapped down, and now the rest of the world is watching. Because this wasn't just about electric cars, it was about Elon Musk, about power, about payback. Here's what no one's telling you. Why is Tesla being treated like a hostile state? What just shattered its global supply chains? And how is this going to hit your wallet, your job, your future? It all started with a number, 100%. That was the figure that exploded across North America like an economic grenade. Canada didn't issue threats. It didn't hold a press conference. It didn't ask for a meeting. Instead, it quietly pulled the trigger. A 100% tariff on all Tesla vehicles entering the country. Not a partial block, not a delay tactic. A complete ban, sealed behind official paperwork that spoke volumes without a single word. Overnight, Tesla was no longer welcome in Canada. The math broke instantly. A Model Y that used to cost 65,000 Canadian dollars, now $130,000. Buyers disappeared. Dealerships froze. Orders vanished. The fallout was immediate. Within hours, a $66 million Starlink contract was torn up. That deal was meant to bring high-speed internet to hundreds of remote Canadian communities. It wasn't just business, it was infrastructure, a lifeline. And Canada cut it. But this wasn't just about Tesla's bottom line. It was a statement. A quiet partner had reached its limit and decided it wouldn't support a company it saw as threatening its economy and sovereignty. And for Elon Musk, this hit deeper than money. Tesla, his crown jewel, wasn't brought down by scandal or lawsuit, but by a single policy move that erased billions in market value. And while Tesla scrambled to respond, Mexico moved in for the knockout. Mexico didn't need a speech either. It just stopped the trucks. Less than 72 hours after Canada's tariff shock, Mexico landed its own punch. Critical Tesla parts, battery packs, sensors, electronic modules were blocked at the border. Export licenses suspended, paperwork lost in bureaucratic review. For Tesla's US factories in California and Texas, it was a death sentence. Assembly lines froze, robots idled, vehicles sat half-built. Hundreds of workers were sent home. No return date, no answers. This was the nightmare scenario Musk had gambled he could avoid. Complete operational paralysis. But Mexico didn't stop there. It began rerouting those same parts to China and the EU. The message was clear. Keep pushing, and Mexico will find new partners. Tesla? It'll be the price America pays. For a company built on speed, control, and just-in-time supply chains, this was more than disruptive. It shattered the illusion that Tesla could survive being politically isolated. And while Musk's executives raced to rebuild supply chains, the damage had already been done. Rebate rebellion. Canada's provinces turn on Tesla. While the federal government delivered the economic blows, Canada's provinces launched a rebellion of their own by cutting funding, not contracts. British Columbia led the way. No warning, no headlines. Just a quiet announcement. Tesla would no longer qualify for electric vehicle rebates. No subsidies, no credits, no help. This move wasn't small. BC had been Tesla's strongest Canadian market for years. Buyers there could get up to $5,000 in rebates per vehicle, sometimes more when federal programs were included. It made Teslas affordable for middle-class families. Now, those incentives were gone. Why? BC said it could no longer justify supporting a company it believed acted against Canadian economic interests. And then the dominoes started to fall. Quebec began reviewing its EV rebate programs. Alberta debated cutting Tesla out completely. The bottom line. This wasn't just a policy change. It was an all-out takedown. Two allies coordinated, not through headlines, but through silent economic warfare. They didn't need speeches. They used tools more powerful: tariffs, trade policy, and political will. Tesla's global dominance didn't just take a hit. It may never recover. And the consequences aren't limited to one company. This is about supply chains, geopolitics, and how fast economic alliances can flip. What just happened to Tesla could happen to any US company. And if you're wondering how it might affect you, your job, your industry, your economy, you're not alone. Because the world isn't just watching anymore. It's choosing sides. The collapse accelerates. Tesla and Starlink shut out. By the end of the month, Tesla's presence in Canada was crumbling, and fast. A sweeping collapse of nationwide subsidies was already in motion. But just as Tesla's footprint began to vanish, another one of Elon Musk's ventures took a major hit. Starlink sabotaged. The Starlink deal was supposed to be a milestone. A $66 million contract to bring high-speed internet to hundreds of remote communities, places where traditional fiber optics had failed. Musk had promised to connect these isolated towns to the digital world. But then, in a move that caught nearly everyone off guard, Canada canceled the agreement. Quietly, surgically. And the reason? Not technical, it was political. Officials announced they would no longer fund initiatives tied to companies they saw as undermining Canada's economic sovereignty. With one decision, Starlink was blocked. For many of those remote communities, Starlink wasn't just convenience, it was essential. It meant access to online education, telemedicine, and communication with the outside world. But the government made its priorities clear: principle over platform. They were willing to delay their own technological progress to take a stand. Behind the scenes, the shock was seismic. Starlink had spent years positioning itself as the answer to rural connectivity in North America. Now, one of its most promising national markets had blacklisted it entirely. Just like Tesla, Starlink wasn't phased out gradually. It was cut off overnight. A clear message. Musk wasn't just losing business. He was losing territory. With Tesla and Starlink blocked at the border, the message couldn't have been clearer. Canada and Mexico weren't just rejecting Elon Musk's products, they were rejecting his presence. And what followed wasn't a negotiation, it was an escalation. Markets react. $146.3 billion vanished within hours of Canada's tariff announcement and the Starlink termination. Tesla's stock began to spiral. Wall Street hadn't seen a drop like this since the dot-com bust. But this wasn't driven by poor earnings or a product failure. It was geopolitical. And the fallout wasn't limited to nervous day traders. It rocked the biggest players in the game. Vanguard, BlackRock, Fidelity. Major institutions began offloading Tesla shares at scale. The result? $146.3 billion. Gone from Tesla's market cap in just 29 trading days. What stunned analysts the most wasn't just the size of the loss. It was the silence. No bold statements from Musk. No damage control from Tesla's leadership. Just silence, while the company's empire took blow after blow. This wasn't just a financial setback, it was a geopolitical earthquake. Two of America's closest allies had drawn a line in the sand. And the rest of the world? They were watching every move. No plan, no press conference. Just chaos. As the crisis escalated, Elon Musk remained silent. No press conferences, no strategic updates, just a handful of cryptic tweets and defiant retweets. Behind the scenes, Tesla's boardroom was in disarray. Emergency calls to restore investor confidence fell flat. Credit lines began to freeze. Analysts from Morgan Stanley, Barclays, and Goldman Sachs slashed their price targets, some by as much as 40%. Tesla wasn't just seen as a risky investment anymore. It had become radioactive. Pension funds pulled out. Mutual funds rebalanced. And retail investors, many longtime Musk loyalists, took to social media in frustration, accusing the company of mismanagement, political recklessness, and tone-deaf leadership. As Tesla's stock ticker bled red, a much bigger fear began to spread. What if the world's most iconic EV company wasn't just in trouble, but on the edge of collapse? The EV price explosion hits Main Street. While Wall Street panicked, the real crisis hit ordinary drivers. With Tesla vehicles vanishing from Canadian and Mexican dealerships, a massive supply vacuum opened up. Demand skyrocketed, and prices followed. Customers who'd spent months on wait lists were suddenly thrown into bidding wars, not for new Teslas, but for used ones. In Toronto, a 2-year-old Model 3 sold for 20% more than its original sticker price. In Mexico City, Model Y owners were stopped in the streets by flippers offering cash on the spot. Rental car companies, which had relied heavily on Tesla fleets, scrambled to buy up any remaining inventory just to stay operational. And this wasn't just Tesla's problem. The shortage rippled through the entire EV industry. Rivian, Lucid, Hyundai, and BYD all saw unprecedented spikes in demand. But none could scale production fast enough to fill the void left by Tesla's collapse. Leases were delayed. Fleet orders were canceled. Uber and Lyft raised prices as vehicle availability dried up. Even traditional gas-powered cars saw a resurgence as EV options disappeared from lots. Governments that had pledged bold EV adoption targets suddenly faced a logistical nightmare. How could they hit sustainability goals when the Cornerstone brand had been wiped from 2 major markets overnight? Supply chain meltdown in the US. As consumers fought over the few EVs left, another crisis was unfolding, this time in America's industrial heartland. In retaliation, Mexican authorities began choking the export of critical Tesla components: batteries, sensors, wiring systems, parts built in Monterrey and Juarez that were essential to Tesla's US factories. Without them, production lines ground to a halt. By week 3 of the embargo, Tesla's Austin Gigafactory had shut down 2 major assembly zones. In Fremont, California, workers were told to go home, with no timeline to return. Thousands of union and non-union workers across Texas, California, and the Midwest were left in limbo, without shifts, without paychecks, and without answers. Ford and GM, once envious of Tesla's speed and vertical integration, now watched the same strategy become a trap. Tesla couldn't pivot. It couldn't outsource. It was locked into its own system, hemorrhaging cash, losing capacity by the hour. Supply chain cancer started trending online. Vendors reported unpaid invoices. Shipping hubs were clogged with containers full of half-assembled parts, sitting idle and rusting. Every day of halted production meant millions lost in revenue and rising operational costs. And for workers, it meant furloughs, layoffs, and a return to a job market suddenly riddled with uncertainty. The political firestorm erupts. As factories dimmed and economic pain deepened, the political crisis at the center of it all exploded. President Trump had campaigned on bringing manufacturing back. Instead, his trade war escalation triggered one of the worst industrial meltdowns in modern memory. The 100% Canadian tariff and Mexico's supply chain chokehold were direct responses to his policies. But the backlash hit harder than anyone expected. Governors in Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania flooded the White House with urgent letters. Union leaders, once tentative allies, demanded immediate policy reversals. Trump's approval rating in key swing states nosedived. Auto manufacturers issued dire warnings of mass layoffs. News networks ran back-to-back segments featuring rural workers caught between nationalistic trade rhetoric and the harsh reality of lost jobs and soaring costs. Behind closed doors, even Republican senators urged the president to reconsider, to dial it back. But retreat would mean admitting failure. And for Trump, that wasn't an option. Doubling down and igniting more backlash. At a press event, Trump addressed the crisis by calling Tesla's losses collateral damage in a necessary economic war. The backlash was immediate. Editorials from coast to coast slammed the administration's arrogance. Protesters gathered outside the Capitol holding signs that read, "You can't MAGA without jobs. We build cars, not headlines. Tariffs took my paycheck." The damage was no longer hypothetical, it was real. And as Musk stayed silent and Trump doubled down, a simple truth became impossible to ignore. This wasn't just a tech takedown, it was an economic reckoning. Save our jobs, not your ego. The collapse within inside Tesla, the mood had turned grim. There were no illusions about help coming from Washington. Instead, executives quietly began discussing bankruptcy protections, large-scale layoffs, and asset liquidations. And as Tesla's public image fell apart, so did its relationship with the very people who helped it rise to global dominance. Dealership desertion. The retail collapse. Tesla's fall from grace isn't just playing out in headlines or Twitter threads. It's happening in real time, across showrooms and parking lots around the world. Following the Canadian tariffs, political backlash, and a growing cultural rejection of the brand, Tesla dealerships have begun shutting down at an alarming rate. Once the cornerstone of its revolutionary direct-to-consumer model, these minimalist, sleek showrooms are now closing their doors as inventory piles up and sales stall. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Tesla had disrupted the car buying experience by ditching traditional dealerships for a more modern, customer-focused approach. But with the company's reputation in tatters, and many of its vehicles now out of reach financially, that once cutting-edge retail model has collapsed. Worse still, Tesla isn't just shrinking its retail presence, it's watching the entire structure decay. Without a strong showroom network, Tesla's direct sales approach has become a liability. The infrastructure isn't there, and without it, the company risks losing direct connection with consumers, the very people who turned it into a household name. Musk's mouth, the man at the center of the storm. At the heart of this crisis is Elon Musk himself. Once celebrated as the visionary behind the electric vehicle revolution, Musk is now seen as Tesla's greatest risk. His political outbursts, provocative tweets, and polarizing opinions have turned him into a divisive figure. And by extension, they've made Tesla a political symbol, something it was never meant to be. What began as bold leadership has now become reckless rhetoric. Musk's vocal support for far-right causes, public attacks on government officials, and inflammatory comments on environmental policy have alienated a significant portion of Tesla's once loyal customer base. For many, buying a Tesla was more than just a car purchase. It was a vote for a greener, more sustainable future. But as Musk has leaned further into the political spotlight, that vision has been tarnished. The damage goes deeper than social media backlash. Consumers and investors alike are walking away. And Musk's influence over Tesla means the company has no escape from the fallout tied to his personal brand. The result? A mass exodus of customers, growing investor distrust, and a brand that once stood for innovation, now associated with division, controversy, and unchecked power. From beloved to boycotted. The shift in public sentiment is more than just perception. It's showing up in the numbers. As Tesla becomes increasingly linked to political extremism, the company is facing a surge of organized boycotts, protests, and customer churn. Once hailed as a tech darling and environmental pioneer, Tesla is now seen by many as a symbol of corporate arrogance and elitism. A darker turn, vandalism on the rise. And now, the backlash has turned violent. Across North America and Europe, Tesla vehicles and properties are being targeted. What was once a badge of innovation and progress is now a target for frustration and anger. Reports of vandalism have been increasing sharply. In France, an entire Tesla dealership was torched by unknown attackers, causing millions in damages and delivering a chilling message. Tesla isn't just financially unstable, it's physically unsafe. The destruction hasn't stopped at buildings. Tesla vehicles have become a common target. Windows smashed, tires slashed, logos defaced. In some cases, owners have reported harassment simply for driving one. A brand in freefall. Tesla's decline is no longer a slow burn. It's an open collapse. Its sales network is shrinking. Its customer base is fragmenting. Its factories are silent. Its CEO is increasingly isolated. And around the world, the brand that once represented the future is now a flashpoint for everything from economic anxiety to political anger. This isn't just a business crisis, it's a cultural turning point. And unless something changes dramatically, and soon, Tesla may go from being one of the most iconic brands in the world to one of the most spectacular corporate implosions of the century. Fear on the streets. Tesla becomes a target. Slashed tires and graffiti have become an everyday reality for Tesla owners in cities like Los Angeles, Toronto, and Berlin. But these aren't random acts of vandalism, they're deliberate statements. Across Germany, the UK, and the US, Tesla is no longer seen simply as a car company. For many, it now represents everything wrong with today's political and economic landscape. Because of Elon Musk's increasingly controversial public views, Tesla has become a symbol of division. The company has drawn fire from both sides of the political spectrum. To many Tesla drivers, the vandalism is more than just property damage. It's a signal that their support for the brand has become a political statement. For some attackers, it's personal revenge. For others, it's protest against corporate greed, political extremism, and a sense that democratic values are slipping away. A car that once stood for progress and innovation is now a target. As these attacks escalate, Tesla faces a dangerous new threat, not from competitors, but from a crumbling public image. Once beloved, now feared. Once aspirational, now divisive. What was once a symbol of the future has become a flashpoint for today's cultural and political tensions, and the brand may not survive it. The employee exodus. At first, it was barely noticeable. An engineer leaving for a rival, a designer moving on, a team lead citing burnout. But within 6 months, it became a flood. Tesla, once the crown jewel of innovation and ambition, began losing talent at an alarming rate. In 2024 alone, over 15% of Tesla's core workforce left the company, and they weren't just any employees. These were the architects of Tesla's breakthrough battery systems, the coders behind its software, the logisticians managing its cutting-edge supply chain, and the designers who gave the cars their signature look. Elon Musk's aggressive, high-pressure management style, which had long been controversial, became unbearable during crisis. With tariffs cutting off trade from Canada and Mexico, internal stress spiked. Employees faced non-stop demands, last-minute design overhauls, and emergency production reassignments. The company that once inspired with a mission-driven culture had turned into a pressure cooker fueled by fear and fatigue. And as Tesla employees walked away, they were met with open arms. Rivals like Rivian, Lucid Motors, BYD, and Hyundai swooped in with offers of higher pay, better work-life balance, and one thing Tesla couldn't promise anymore: a future free from political baggage. This mass departure wasn't just a short-term blow. It jeopardized Tesla's long-term vision. Innovations were delayed, redesigns stalled, prototypes gathered dust, departments were understaffed, deadlines came and went. Professional forums lit up with anonymous posts from insiders describing chaos, poor communication, and a leadership team more focused on saving face than saving the product. Tesla, once the poster child for visionary ambition, now looked like a company collapsing under its own weight. When your strength becomes your weakness. Vertical integration. Fails Tesla's vertical integration, once praised as its secret weapon, has become its biggest vulnerability. While traditional automakers relied on wide supplier networks, Tesla had built everything in-house. It was faster, more efficient, and tightly controlled. Until it wasn't. When Canada and Mexico cut ties, that entire system broke. There were no alternatives, no backup suppliers, no safety net. Everything, from battery modules built in Mexico to wiring harnesses routed through Canadian ports, was stuck. Key components simply couldn't get through, and Tesla's assembly lines ground to a halt. Legacy automakers were able to pivot quickly, switching suppliers and rerouting shipments. Tesla couldn't. Its rigid, centralized system left no room for flexibility. Inside the company, executives scrambled to respond. Plans were drafted to localize parts of production. But those pivots would take years, not weeks. And Tesla's global supply options weren't looking much better. Many overseas suppliers, spooked by the instability, had already shifted their production capacity to rival brands. Tesla's once celebrated integration was now a trap. A system built for speed had become a bottleneck. A model designed for control had become a liability. Tesla isn't just fighting a business battle, it's caught in a cultural, political, and economic war that's unraveling everything it once stood for. Customers are walking away. Employees are fleeing. Factories are stalling. And the man at the center, Elon Musk, is no longer viewed as a visionary, but as a polarizing figure whose shadow threatens to consume the company he built. The fall isn't just about one company. It's a warning about what happens when innovation becomes inseparable from ideology, when brand identity becomes political currency. Tesla's future, once electrifying, now hangs in the balance. Tesla's fall, from dominance to desperation. As global markets grew more unpredictable, Tesla's competitors started looking like safer bets. And while other automakers adapted, Tesla's production schedules began to buckle. Gigafactories in Texas and California were no longer running at full capacity. The much-anticipated launch of the Model 2, Tesla's next-generation vehicle, came and went with no car in sight. Customers grew restless. Dealerships saw wait lists explode, followed quickly by a wave of refund requests. Tesla's reliability ratings tanked. It was a cruel twist of fate. The very vertical integration system Elon Musk once celebrated as Tesla's unbeatable advantage had become its biggest weakness, a cage from which the company couldn't escape. And as North American production slowed to a crawl, things across the Atlantic weren't faring any better. Europe turns its back. Sales in Germany, Tesla's most important European market, dropped by over 70%. And this time, it wasn't just about logistics, it was personal. European consumers were increasingly put off by Musk's outspoken political views, his alignment with American far-right ideologies, and his ongoing clashes with environmental regulators. In response, European governments pulled the plug, removing EV subsidies that had once powered Tesla's explosive growth. Partnerships were canceled. Media narratives flipped. Tesla went from being praised as a climate tech trailblazer to being portrayed as a political liability. At Gigafactory Berlin, production goals were slashed. New hiring froze. Entire teams were put under internal review. There were even rumors of partial shutdowns. Dealerships across the continent tried slashing prices to move stock, but even major discounts couldn't win back buyers. Consumers who once waited months for a Tesla were now picking Volkswagens, Renaults, and BYDs without a second thought. What started as a North American trade standoff had morphed into a full-scale global brand rejection. The North American collapse. By early 2025, Tesla was in crisis. Shut out of Canada, cut off by Mexico, losing traction in Europe. What remained was a shrinking US customer base, a fractured workforce, and a supply chain in tatters. The company wasn't just losing sales, it was losing lifelines. Without Canada, Tesla had no access to key raw materials and no northern market. Without Mexico, it had no route for critical components like batteries and sensor arrays. Without Europe, there was no overseas demand to anchor international operations. Inside Tesla's boardroom, the unthinkable was finally being discussed. Was it time for Elon Musk to step down? Investor trust was crumbling. Government relationships had eroded. Consumers, once loyal, now felt betrayed. And the founder who once embodied Tesla's mission had become its greatest liability. The existential crisis. Tesla was never just a car company. It was a promise of clean energy, of innovation, of a more sustainable future. But now, that promise is in jeopardy. What we're witnessing isn't just a brand stumble. It's a case study in how even the most iconic companies can falter. When leadership turns divisive, when flexibility is sacrificed for control, and when the world stops buying into the myth, production has slowed to a crawl. Share prices have flatlined. Top talent has stopped knocking on the door. Tesla, once the undisputed name in electric vehicles, is now being spoken of in the past tense. The empire hasn't just fallen from grace, it's fallen out of time. What's next? What comes next for Tesla won't be decided in board meetings or earnings calls. It'll be decided in factories, in showrooms, in the homes of customers who once believed. Because this is no longer a fight for market share, it's a fight for survival, against global governments, fractured supply chains, and a public image that may be beyond repair. So what do you think? Is this the end of Tesla's reign? Or can Elon Musk pull off one last miracle? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read them all. And if you want to stay ahead of the next big shift in tech, trade, and global markets, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because when the next collapse hits, you'll hear it here first.